This is the BBC.
All right, so there you are. Anyway, welcome. It's another Confessions podcast from your friends at Radio 2. All together. ID Sergeant, that was, by the way. Duration 18 seconds, in case you're doing your timings. So here we go. It's another Confessions podcast. Then this week we've had confessions entitled Saved by the Bell, Blunderwall, Knocking on Kevin's Door, and The Drugs Do Work. Here they all come. Dear Simon and the League of Lenient Lovelies.
Yeah.
It's new and it's fresh. Allow me to take you back to the halcyon days of the early summer 1994, to a small convent school I attended in a sleepy Welsh valley town. School term was soon to end, and these were exciting times for a 9-year-old boy like me. You see, the 1994 Football World Cup was nearly upon us, and close behind it were 6 weeks of summer holidays. I was beside myself with anticipation of a summer spent gorging on football and a little bit more football. To ready ourselves for the competition and ensure that we could confidently identify the entire lineup of teams like Cameroon and South Korea, myself and the other boys in our class were heavily involved in collecting football stickers for our World Cup sticker books. I imagine, Bobby, you were a big sticker collector.
Couldn't get enough of them.
Yeah, well,
yes.
you have to. Did you go for the coins for the petrol station?
Yeah, of
Got
course.
that as well.
Back in the 70s.
We spent is that what it was?
Yes.
Okay. We spent every waking moment outside of lessons swapping stickers, searching for rare players and finding the much coveted shinies. Got that. Oh, I need that swap. Go on. Oh, come on. Stickers passed through grubby hands at manic speeds. Ignorant of the beautiful game and disapproving of the sticker collecting, however, was Mrs. Trumbull, our class teacher. She was an obstinate, hard-eyed sort who was determined to eke out every last moment of imparting knowledge to her charges before they left her class forever. In retrospect, she was probably a lovely lady who just wanted the best for her kids, but to a 9-year-old, her zero-tolerance attitude, as we discussed in the playground at the time, and a booming, room-shaking bark meant that she was absolutely terrifying. Mrs. Trumbull was particularly fond of inventors and pioneers such as Captain Scott and Alexander Graham Bell. One day in summer term, she spent the morning teaching us all about Sir Alexander Fleming and his world-changing discovery of penicillin. No one paid much attention, however, as we were all focused on the clock, waiting for the school bell to ring for lunch and further football sticker action. Got it. I need that one. Can I have your shiny? Please. Be your best friend. Give you some fudge. Sure enough, the bell finally went and was... I remember it.
Fudge? Right, whatever.
Yeah, you could swap.
Finger of fudge.
You could swap some fudge.
Really?
For Ronaldo.
Did it have to be fudge?
Brilliant.
The old Ronaldo.
Yeah, fat Ronaldo.
Different times. I think he'd been eating the fudge. Sure enough, the bell finally went, and so excited was I about trying to find the famous striker Romario to complete my Brazil squad page. How much for... I think he's 2 fingers of fudge at least for Romario. I even waved food of any kind and absent-mindedly stuffed my mum's butter and ham sandwich, with the crusts cut off, into the recesses of my old-fashioned desk. You know, the ones where you lift the lid to store your belongings. A Romario sticker was obtained, and a week passed without a care, until one school morning we walked into class to find a very solemn and sour Mrs. Trumbull stood waiting for us, her face set and impassive. She said nothing while we took our seats, and then, to my dawning horror, Mrs. Trumbull reached over to her desk, grabbed something from it, and brandished it high in the air. Father Simon, I'm ashamed to say, it was my sandwich. Barely recognisable now, I knew it from the clear plastic bag it had been stored in, and it's fair to say the sandwich looked utterly revolting, wet and green and thickly covered in slimy, clumpy mould. I'd meant to throw it away, but the glorious game of football had made me forget all about it. I went cold and my heart sank. I was in trouble. You have to do this in a big Welsh accent, Father Simon.
Great.
However, Welsh John,
yes.
I'm not going to.
Oh, shame.
Quiet, year 4, barked Mrs. Trumbull.
Yeah, go on.
Let's not deal in stereotypes.
Let's
Simon.
not.
Okay. It's come to my attention that our cleaner was tidying up the schoolroom ready for the end of term, looked in one student's desk, and she came across this. The oozy remnants swayed and rotated in her lofted hand. I breathed deeply and braced myself for the onslaught that was to come. She pointed across the room at me, and the entire class wheeled around in their seats to study my reddening face. However, I wasn't expecting what she said next. John here has obviously taken our lessons so close to heart that he's decided to experiment with making his own penicillin. If only you other boys stop fussing so much with those stupid football stickers, or whatever they're called, and applied yourselves more, you could be like him and learn something. Well done, John. I'm proud of you, young fella. She didn't say that. My jaw completely dropped. The class regarded me in something like awe, a junior boffin in their very midst, a true science pioneer. Sweating, my mouth popped open, closed like a goldfish. I was astounded. It was all the same to you, John. The experiment has been a success, but can I now dispose of the results, please? Asked Mrs. Trumbull. I nodded wordlessly, and she dropped the sandwich into the bin, and the class resumed its normal course. I didn't know how, but I had escaped unscathed, and this truth, Father Simon, has remained a secret for 23 years. And so I need forgiveness not from Mrs. Trumbull, who, despite her keen scientific mind, had led herself to the wrong conclusions in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. I also don't seek forgiveness from the school cleaner, who shouldn't have been poking her nose into my private affairs. Thanks very much indeed. Butt out! It's from Sir Alexander Fleming himself that I have to say sorry. He'd made the discovery of penicillin accidentally, which had merited being knighted in 1944 and given a Nobel Prize in 1945. But to the population of a small convent school in a sleepy Welsh Valley town, one 9-year-old boy genius had just done the very same. I also asked forgiveness from my mum, whose sandwiches were always very tasty. Simon and the League, I throw myself down before your judgment, but please bear in mind I always finish my sandwiches now. I even eat the crusts. Says Welsh John. What was that cleaner do? I'll just have a little look. Oh, look, smelly sandwich. Sister Bobby.
Well, that's the thing. The cleaner probably smelt it. I always remember being told off. Don't grow penicillin in your hot milk cups. Bring your cups down, Bobby, otherwise you're in trouble. The thing is, Mrs. Trumbull knew.
That's a good upbringing, that is.
That is. Mrs. Trumbull knew. I think she just turned a really negative situation where she could tell him off into something positive. She's fab. I love her. I wish I had her as a teacher. Completely forgiven. Very unsounding Welsh John. Yes. Welsh John, you're forgiven.
Okay, all right, Brother Matthew.
Yes, 94 World Cup, from what I remember, was a pretty dull World Cup. No England, and, the final went to penalties. It was pretty awful. So,
Is that the one in America?
Yes, it was, yes. Diana Ross missed an open goal. What I would say is, my instinct is that Mrs. Trumbull actually was trying to hammer home what penicillin was to a bunch of very bored students. And she decided, the way I'm going to do this is I am going to find this, and when this sandwich lands on her lap, she thinks, I'm going to make use of this, and these kids are going to understand what penicillin really is when I produce this sandwich. So I think she knew exactly what she was doing, and for that reason I'm going to forgive.
A 70s teacher would have picked up the sandwich and thrown it at Welsh John.
Different times.
Take this home, boy.
Yeah.
But yes, we moved on.
Fortunately we have, haven't we?
Yeah. Sounded like something out of Oliver.
BBC Radio 2.
Father Mayo, listening to the recent confession where mention was made of the Glasgow Roses, I was... let's not get into that again, because that isn't a particularly Glaswegian term. It was just like an ad-lib that happened at the time. I was reminded of an unfortunate incident in which I was involved in 1992. Back then, I was a young, fresh-faced and naive probationary constable in Glasgow, and on the day in question, I was sent to see the duty officer, Inspector Jardine. It's yourself, young Stuart. No, I'm not going to even attempt. But,
really?
Yes. It's yourself, young Stuart, he said. And when I arrived, there's a prisoner I need watching. He's only been brought in a few hours ago, and he's ranting and fighting with everybody. Now, you'll only need to watch him for an hour or so. Then you'll be relieved by an officer from Bishop Briggs, as he's their prisoner. But I'll check on him in a wee while if he's calmed down. I'll release him for a report. Okay. Keep him calm. I thought, keep him calm and he'll get out. Easy enough. I realised if all went well, I could still make the big card school, which took place during the refreshment break at 3 a.m. These are very important issues.
Different times.
Maybe. Ian Rankin could have written this one.
Yeah.
Satisfied this was something I could handle, I took the lift to the 4th floor, where the observation cell was situated. But instead of a ranting and raving prisoner, my man was tucked up in his blue plastic-covered mattress and fast asleep. Delighted that an easy night and a card game was ahead of me, I settled down to the deep recesses of the easy chair and I picked up a magazine. Shortly afterwards, my prisoner aroused from his slumbers and, peeking out from under his itchy blanket, looked, I have to say, rather alarmed. The prisoner then got up and signalled through the glass wall that he urgently wanted to speak with me. I went out into the cell passageway, where I then opened the small hatch in the middle of the sturdy steel cell door. The prisoner, who turned out to be a well-spoken chap from the leafy suburbs, clearly didn't know where he was. So he asked me. He feared the very worst when I said he'd been arrested, because he said, "Don't you come in here." What's wrong with that? What's wrong?
Okay.
It's my leafy suburb
Yes,
voice.
it is, isn't it?
Don't you come in here. I've seen that film Midnight Express. I don't want you in here. On learning the grisly details of his arrest for going daft inside and then outside a pub in sleepy Kirkintilloch, followed by a bout of going bananas at the charge bar and assaulting various police officers, he muttered the now ubiquitous excuse for public buffoonery, which was, "Somebody must have spiked my drink, boss," which is what he said. But of greater concern to the gentleman, it turned out, were the presence or whereabouts of his new Timberland boots, a birthday gift from his wife, as it turned out. "Don't worry," I said, as I picked up the boots from outside his cell and I showed them to him. "What about my jacket?" he says, as he turned his head sideways and poked it out of the hatch for a good look at the floor. "Right, what about my jacket?" He's looking there. "Yes, it's here too. Now pop your head back into the cell. The duty officer is going to visit you soon, and if you're calm, you can go home." "OK, boss," says the prisoner, who then attempted to pull his head back through the hatch.
Oh, no.
Whereupon it became wedged fast. Realising we had a predicament between us, we attempted the only course of action we knew. He pulled inwards whilst I pushed on the crown of his head. However, it wouldn't budge, and our technique was apparently quite painful, as the prisoner's ears bent back and forwards like the flapping gills of a stranded fish.
Oh, lovely. What a picture.
It was at this point I heard the approach of the service lift and surmised correctly that Inspector Jardine would soon be with us. This meant that not only was I in big trouble, but more importantly, there would be no card school for me that morning. Inspired by my rising panic, I rushed down the corridor to the sink as the prisoner howled away in agony. To make matters worse, the other prisoners on the floor were now rousing and clearly not best pleased, as they shouted a number of words that I hadn't heard before and won't be writing down here. At the sink, I picked up the bar of pink carbolic soap, soaked it in water, ran back to the cell hatch and rubbed the prisoner's now bright red ears vigorously. Suitably soaped up, I then gave one last strong shove to the top of his head and he popped back into the cell. If you'll imagine, like the opposite of a champagne cork coming out of the bottle. It's not really like that at all. I closed the hatch just as the lift doors opened, plonked back down in my seat and picked up the magazine as if I'd been there for ages. As Inspector Jardine walked into the room, the prisoner was hopping frantically about his cell in the style of John Cleese's Basil Fawlty, clutching his swollen ears and screaming blue murder, accompanied by the very grumpy shouts from the other prisoners. "Oh dear goodness," exclaimed the inspector, as Glaswegian inspectors are prone to do. "We'll need to keep this man for the court. He needs to be seen by the duty psychiatrist." Standing to attention, I replied, "Yes, sir. He's been like this for some time, and I didn't want to disturb you, sir." "Well, Father Mayo, I seek forgiveness not only for my careless inattention that followed the poor prisoner to poke his head out of his cell hatch contrary to forced standing orders and common sense, nor do I seek forgiveness for the extra paperwork, such as risk forms, that I caused for my inspector through not fessing up. But instead I seek your forgiveness, your compassionate forgiveness, for my transgression against my dear older and wiser colleague Roger from the neighbouring Bishopbriggs police force, who had to spend the rest of the long, long night watching the prisoner when he should have instead been tucked up in his panda car on Little Hill Golf Course with a cup of coffee. He also missed the big card school that night, which had a top prize of £10. Anyway, it's the latest from Superintendent Stewart, which Ian Rankin would knock that up into his latest bestseller in a couple of years' time. Or maybe just a little incident in there. Well, it had a little bit of carry-on in there as well, Superintendent Stewart. What do you think of that, Sister Bobby?
Well, Superintendent Stewart, I don't know why he just didn't come clean. Because what that meant is the prisoner couldn't go home, and obviously they were upset. So
I think he was going to get into trouble for allowing the prisoner to stick his head out the window.
So it'd be his fault. So
Yes.
basically, yeah, but of course then two other things happened that are not fair. Yeah, because prisoner Big Boots got kept in for longer than he should have done. Then his friend, Superintendent Stewart, although funny, very funny, you are not forgiven.
Yeah, that's certainly true, because he did allow the prisoner to stay in there for a lot longer.
Well,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, here's the point. He had no control over prisoner Big Boots deciding to stick his head out of a cell hatch. Now, I have limited knowledge of the size of cell hatches, but from having watched the bill, they're really tiny things. Who thinks they're going to stick their head through that and be
Someone
able to
with
get
a small head.
Absolutely, yes. And
From the leafy suburbs of Glasgow.
Clearly, with that accent. So I'm going to forgive, because he didn't have any control over your man and his tiny wee head. And also great reference to Midnight Express. What a great movie. So I am going to forgive just for that alone.
Father Simon and the members of the BBC Judicial Triumvirate.
Yes.
That's fab.
That's what we are.
The BJT, he's calling it. All right? It's almost a sandwich.
It is.
Or an Indian political party, but not quite. My confession goes back 27 years to a simpler time when the Channel Tunnel was still under construction. John Barnes told us to hold and give and do it at the right time. And of course, Macaulay Culkin was a Hollywood sensation. You will of course remember Home Alone, a movie with the plot so implausible makes you want to yell at the screen with fury and gives a whole new meaning to the term incompetent parenthood. But I digress. Which is true, the parents are spectacularly terrible. I was 6 years old, says Nathan at the time that movie came out, and for a kid of my age, the concept of a young boy taking on a pair of burglars all by himself was the most exciting I had experienced. I watched Home Alone countless times and would spend hours fantasizing about battling prospective thieves and villains and protecting family property. Gradually, I was no longer feeling satisfied with just fantasies. I wanted to become Kevin for a brief moment and live the dream of thwarting criminals and outsmarting dumb adults. I therefore began setting traps all over the house.
What?
Causing great... the whole point is it's against burglars, not against your family.
Just in case.
Causing great angst to my poor parents, I balanced buckets of water over doors, left toy cars at the bottom of stairs. Really? Balanced books inside toy cupboards, all that kind of thing. Wow, Nathan, you were a lot of fun. After a while, my parents had become accustomed to all of my traps and no longer fell for them. I was starting to run out of ideas and I needed fresh victims. Dear me, send him to boarding school.
Obviously.
A few weeks later, we were invited to my grandparents' house to celebrate my grandmother's birthday. As she was entering her fabulous 50s, it was to be a rather large party with uncles, aunts, cousins and everything. I was probably the youngest in the family, and pretty soon I was feeling bored and restless. After a fruitless hour of trying to keep myself entertained by excavating my nostrils,
Lovely.
I had one of those light bulb moments and a sinister grin appeared on my face. Now, my grandfather was a collector of antiquities.
Oh, well, that's going to be fine. Yes.
Had a large number of statues, old furniture, vases,
Yeah.
porcelain, bit of bronze, you get the picture. It was the perfect setting. Whilst everyone was chatting in the living room, I sneaked out to the hallway unobserved. There I set about preparing what was to be my masterpiece, my Mona Lisa, my girl with the pearl earring. Left out of the doorway to the living room was a table with a large vase resting on top. To the right, a tall display cabinet with a twin door set up. Like in a trance, I rummaged up some string and crept back to the hallway, closing the living room door behind me. I then set up tying the vase and the cabinet door handles to the doorknob methodically, making sure that the string was tight and that the knots were secure. Kevin McAllister would have been so proud. Everyone else, Nathan, thinks you're an idiot. When everything was prepared, I ran back to the living room through the kitchen, thus leaving the door shut and the trap set. I quietly sat down on the couch, my hands locked in front of me and resting on my lap, looking like an angel. What I did not know at the time was A, the vase was bronze and thus carried a lot of weight. B, the cabinet doors were locked and the cabinet itself top-heavy. It did not take long for someone to test the living room door, and indeed my grandmother's sister grabbed the doorknob and pulled gently. The door did not budge. Looking surprised, she lifted her head, turned back to us and said, "Is the door locked?" To which my grandfather replied, "Course not, dear. There isn't even a key for that door." That reply apparently boosted her confidence because she tried the doorknob a second time, this time with significantly more force, and sprung it open.
Yeah.
Nanoseconds later, there was a sickening noise as the cabinet came crashing down in front of her from one side, whilst the heavy bronze vase attacked her from the other side. Tumbling on the floor, bits of glass flying everywhere, she screamed with panic and took a step back, tripping over the living room carpet and landing on a guest. In the meantime, my grandfather stood up in horror, tears in his eyes, saying, "My antiques! My antiques!" He stumbled forward to save what he could from the ruins, but tripped and fell on top of the already prone guest and my grandmother's sister, who was still hyperventilating and sobbing uncontrollably. I am ashamed to admit I actually enjoyed the spectacle.
What?
And actually imagined what my acceptance speech was going to be like when I was to receive the Medal of Bravery from the local police for having outsmarted the criminals. Nathan! My parents, of course, immediately knew what had happened and were looking pale as snow, but said nothing. Perhaps they were too ashamed for bringing such a devil into the world. In any case, 25 years later, I feel the need for forgiveness, Father Simon, and the members of the BJT, that's you guys, from my grandfather for having ruined his antiques, my grandmother for having ruined her 50th birthday party, although she can't claim it didn't go with a bang. My parents for having to deal with such a difficult child and suffer the embarrassment that goes with it, and to my grandmother's sister, who could very well have received the shock of her life on that day. Personally, I blame it on Kevin, says Nathan. I don't think you're going to get away with any of this. You do sound a particularly challenging.
That's the word we use now. Yeah.
So imagine Nathan's parents coming for your for the parents' evening at school. I've just got a few words to say. Anyway, Sister Bobby.
Well, whilst I kind of applaud you for exploration of all the forces, the forces of physics and kind of what works and doesn't work and weights and measures and all that, that's a good thing. However, it wasn't for good intentions. It was for mischievous intentions, but then you're young, Nathan, so it's really difficult. But you don't sound very sorry now about your granddad's things, so you may not have appreciated back then, but I'm not sure you're truly sorry now either. No. So, Nathan, this time, you are not forgiven.
And maybe the grandparents are still with us, in which case you need to make amends, because I think these antiques will be worth a bob or two, and you, Nathan, now have maybe a bob or two, certainly more money than you used to have. So I think you need to pay reparations to the grandparents.
I like this.
Actually, this is a new thing. We could put a financial cost.
Yeah.
So we're going to fine you, Nathan. What do you think of fine?
Well, obviously, taking everything into account, I'm going to say it needs to be in the four figures. 4 figures.
25 grand, I think.
So, yes, 5 figures. So, yeah, I mean, no, this is one of those things where everyone says, oh, we'll laugh about this later. No, we won't, Nathan, because you brought everything crashing down. But I think really it's the parents who need to shoulder some of the burden here, because surely the parents at some point should have said, look, Nathan, I know you love doing all of these hilarious pranks when we're at home, but now we're going to Granny and Grandad's. Let's probably temper that while we're there and not do any of your nonsense stuff there. So really it's the parents' fault and not Nathan. So therefore I'm going to forgive.
BBC Radio 2.
I suppose there's a little bit of a warning on this one for those people partaking of food right about this time. It's only a little kind of gentle one, but everything should be fine.
Okay.
Just
trusting you on this.
Yeah. Dear Simon and the fastidious philanthropists of forgiveness, which is a new one. So full marks, Tammy, for that. A promising start. Thank you, Tammy. I'd like to take you back to the summer of 2015, a time so recent that the whiff of my confession is more than a little fresh. It was a warm Sunday afternoon and I was attending a barbecue. Spirits were high, sausages were traditionally cremated on the outside and somewhat undercooked on the inside. And the drink, it floweth like my summer dress.
Very good.
Says
This is
Tammy.
brilliant already.
Fast forward to the next morning and I woke with a slightly fuzzy head, which I told myself was to be expected because of the wine. I felt certain that after a coffee my impending hangover would dissipate, so I busied myself with my normal morning routine of shower, hair and makeup. However, something was definitely off, and the more I tried to go about my normal routine, the more peculiar I felt. My stomach was making those worrying noises, and my mind drifted back to the undercooked sausages on the barbecue, and it was then that I knew, without even consulting NHS Direct, that I was probably suffering from a rather poorly tummy. Okay? Fine. All right so far. Now, I'm not one to be defeated by a small dose of food poisoning, Father Simon, so I figured I would call in somewhere to get some relief in the form of a bung you up for a week kind of tablet. But because of the unsociable hour, I needed to leave for work, and there was only one place that could sell me such tablets, which is my local petrol station. Now, no one really relishes the thought of asking for these kinds of tablets in front of anyone else. So, as I pulled into the parking spaces, I was relieved to see I was the only customer. Wasting not a second, I got out of my car, ran across the forecourt and rushed straight to the counter. Sitting on a chair to the left of the counter was an elderly female attendant who hadn't heard me come in, so I coughed to get her attention. Coughed carefully, I should say. She smiled as she slowly got off her chair and started shuffling towards the counter. As I willed her to just get a move on, I heard the dreaded tinkle of the bell above the door, not once but twice. 2 men had come in, and they took their place in the queue behind me, and still the elderly lady hadn't actually even reached the counter. She finally took her place at the till. I snuck a glimpse at the man behind me, holding his milk and his paper, and I have to tell you, coincidentally, he was absolutely gorgeous. Think of a mixture of Daniel Craig and Tom Hardy. Well, my stomach dropped, but only, just as far as was sensible.
It's Matt.
And I knew... It's not far off.
Uncanny.
I knew then that this particular interaction was going to be completely awful. I looked pleadingly at the attendant across the counter and whispered, Can I have some Imodium, please? Though obviously other anti-diarrhea tablets are available.
Yeah.
Though obviously I didn't say that, but I'm just doing that for compliance
Well done.
reasons. Eh? She shouts back at me. I gathered all my courage, I gritted my teeth, and as the door chime tinkled again, announcing the arrival of a third customer, I said slightly, I need some Imodium tablets. Other anti-diarrhea tablets are obviously available, but at this precise moment, them. The woman looked at me, clearly confused by the fact that I was mumbling like in a BBC drama, and then gestured towards the tobacco products and said, You want them? I can't hear you, love. Well, I was exasperated now and praying that she would follow my earnest stare towards the product in question. I whispered pitifully, Imodium, please. Wine gums? She says. It was at this point that a loud Scottish accent,
Oh, excellent. Oh, this will be good.
belonging to the trucker who had just joined the back of the queue, bellowed,
Oh, she didn't want wine gums. She's got the runs. She wants squat stopper tablets.
She got the roses.
That's just one of my voices,
Well done.
by the way.
He was blind. That's uncanny.
I swear up until that point I'd never truly understood the phrase, I want the ground to open up and swallow me, but I did then. Honestly, the shame that I felt as the look of recognition dawned on the attendant's face, the speed she pushed herself in order to reach the tablets for me, the agonising seconds it took for me to make my purchase, not waiting for my £4 change, and then the quick bolt to the forecourt toilet, avoiding eye contact with anyone. However traumatic my experience, though, it doesn't excuse my actions, and I feel I need to seek forgiveness, not from the trucker, who outed me, or from the handsome Daniel Craig Tom Hardy hybrid, but from the poor attendant. Not only was the toilet I headed to staff only, but later that day I realised that instead of handing over £10 for the £6 purchase, I'd only given her a fiver. I'd glared at the poor woman when she couldn't understand my whispering. I clearly put pressure on her to move quicker than she thought she was probably comfortable with. I robbed her of 80p, and then I topped it off by...
No, you didn't.
I
That's
decided
where it
that.
ended.
I
Yeah.
remember that.
Leave it there. Yeah.
I feel truly dreadful about all of this, and I ask for your leniency. But I thought my accents are getting better. Right, Tammy was in a very Tammy's tricky situation. Sister Bobby's going to speak now.
I thought that confession was going to be so much worse than it was.
It could have been, it could have
really,
been.
Yeah, my imagination was running. I love the trucker. Well done for the trucker for saving you. He really did save you, and he was, just cut through the embarrassment and said, "Look, she needs that, and she needs it quick." So well done to him. Can I forgive you? Well, I think these assistants know. I think they know when they can read your body language. They know when it's uncomfortable. So I don't know whether you need forgiveness. I don't know, because I think she may have played you along there.
So
There's
the
just
old
the
lady,
chance.
she did it on purpose. She
She just might have done, just said, "What is it again you want?" Anyway, like other things that you feel embarrassed asking for.
So you're forgiving, are you?
I'm not forgiving.
You're not forgiving. Oh, okay. Nige.
Well, I thought the whole thing, I mean, roll your own diarrhea tablets. I thought that was at one stage what she was going to ask for. It was very confusing. Delighted that Daniel Craig Hardy, a.k.a. Matt Williams, he didn't utter a word, did he? Because it was really just the Scotsman who helped out.
He smoulded that.
He did, indeed. Smoulded beautifully. And it wasn't her fault that she shortchanged the lady because she was unaware of it at the time. She was obviously in need. And the fact, but Tammy, you've called it as, but I'm one of the fastidious philanthropists of forgiveness, which I would definitely, on this occasion, forgive you, because you were caught short and you did incredibly well considering.
Brother Matthew.
Well, yes, I'm going to go along with Bobby on this one. I think that the attendant knew. I think this is what she lives for, is people coming in and saying, can I have that very embarrassing thing that's across the counter, please, because I don't want anyone else to know. And her to say, do you want some fags? Is that what it is? Say it louder. Lots of very important people behind you in the queue. So I am going to forgive because, you know, it's fun.
Well, they were this week's confessions. I hope you enjoyed those. Maybe you forgave a couple of people along the way. If it has provoked a deep and humorous tale from somewhere in your soul, which you've forgotten about, really. confessions@bbc.co.uk if you want to share it. And if you missed any of the shows this week, thanks a lot. I mean, we bothered to turn up. Anyway, you can listen again back online. You can download to your smartphone or tablet from that very nice iPlayer radio app. Monday, we had Yes Minister co-creator Jonathan Lynn talking about his new book, and U2 set designer about their amazing new stage show. Tuesday was a Tunes Day with Chicago, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Donna Summer and Benny Troy, bit of Northern Soul. And the amazing history of football stickers was on Tuesday. Wednesday, Stockard Channing, the one and only, she of Grease, West Wing, Good Wife, and multiple Tony and Emmy Awards. She was in to tell us about her new play. And on Foodie Thursday, Nigel cooked up. Get excited. Share the love. Courgette, ricotta and dill tart with spelt rye pastry. Anyway, we also found out whether clouds were really edible. I know, and what they stink of. So if you made it to the end of last week's podcast, we were asking you to tweet, I'm suffering from itchy chest stubble. And Dabs and Scott and Sarah O'Neill and Mr. Payne and Steve Nash and Neris did precisely that. This week's top code phrase is... somebody spiked my drink, boss. Shouldn't be too difficult, should it? That was too low key. Let's do this instead. Just when you thought we'd finished. That was a Christmas jingle, see? It felt emotional, but it felt out of place. So we're going to leave you with a smile on your face with ID Maroon Ramp. Good voiceover.
BBC